something lodges in the mind. It could be an image, it could be someone imagined, it could be a story someone told you, it could be a memory. But it's no use there. I mean, it's just lodging in the mind. And you could have, I don't know how many you could have at the same time, but quite a number. And what happens is that one of them moves into rhythm. And it moves into rhythm when you least expect it. So in other words, you could be on your holidays, or you could be on a Friday night about to go out, and suddenly would come a sentence. And the sentence would have the full weight of a novel in it. In other words, it's like a melody. I think a composer, a 19th century composer might get it as melody. And you would write the sentence down, and then write another one. And maybe just leave those two, and go back to it over the next week or so, looking at them. And then maybe leave that for a year. But what you've got is you've got the book. Now the only thing you need to do now is work. And working becomes a form of erasure as much as a form of addition, where you're constantly thinking up things to put into the book. So that's really how it works. I mean, you have to remember that the main part of the job is work. Inspiration doesn't help. You only get that rhythm thing once. You don't need it twice. What you need to do then is to build on that. And building on that is just called slow, careful work. And how that slow and careful is that every sentence creates both a solution and a problem for the next sentence. It can't be exactly the same. If you say, he went down the road, he went into the house, he went up the stairs, unless you're doing that deliberately, the three sentences of exactly the same form, the reader will get, unless you're doing it deliberately for a certain effect, then a monotony breaks in. So if you go, he went down the road, and you go, on seeing, but then on seeing the house he went in is too easy. But you could say, he noticed that the window of the house upstairs still had the curtains drawn and wondered if there was someone sleeping there. Inside, comma, he listened for a second. And so you're varying the sentence rhythms. In the same way, you find Cézanne does this, where he varies the brush stroke, that he varies the tonal weight of each brush stroke. And you're doing that as you're working. You're always reading back over the previous two sentences to see what is needed now rhythmically. But you know what's needed, you know what you need to achieve, but you have to constantly watch that you're creating a sort of melody that's working in the prose that isn't monotonous or doesn't draw the reader's attention to it. It needs to seem natural, to seem, even if it's third person, to seem part of a voice or how a voice might speak, that doesn't seem literary or forced or written by someone who is too nervous, that you've got to make it seem like it was ordinary. But in order to do that, you have to constantly make decisions and make excisions and cut back or really, really concentrate. Yes, that the first sentence of the book, and that would very seldom change, would be the sentence that comes to you unbidden, unexpectedly, as rhythm. And that would be the first sentence of the book. You see, it could also be the first sentence of a short story. Now I'm working on a short story, or I was working. It's a short story called The Use of Reason, and it's in one of my books of stories. And it is about a thief, and someone who was a well-known thief. And I need to get the story started. And as I was coming back from the supermarket with 2 bags of groceries, the sentence came to me. And the sentence was, the city was a great emptiness. And then I started to repeat the word empty. I was thinking about empty back gardens, empty attic spaces, empty kitchens, empty downstairs rooms at night, empty bedrooms during the day, empty, and therefore he could easily enter into these empty spaces to do what he needed to do. So the word empty becomes the word. It's all over the first page, begins with, for no reason, I know exactly where I am. I'm walking down a hill, not much of a hill, 2 bags. The city was a great emptiness. And we don't think about cities like that. We think about cities as a great fullness, you know, filled with people, filled with buildings, filled with streets. But actually, once you think about that, most of the spaces in a city at any given time are empty. So I thought the city was a great emptiness, and I stopped because if I'd remember this wrong when I get home, it won't be the same sentence. The word "great" was important somehow. The city was a great emptiness, and so I wrote it down whatever way I could. I probably had a pen on me on anything. And then when I got home, I had it then, and I could do the story.
Do you do it on a computer? Or
no,
do you write?
No, I write with one of these pens. I mean, they will die out very soon, and I'm buying them in bulk because they've ink in them. And I write in a notebook on the right-hand side of the page. I leave the left-hand side blank. You see, what I might do with the opening thing I've been describing is I might do that onto a word processor, so I can just see it so clearly. But once the first few paragraphs are there on that, I'll rewrite them then into a notebook, and then I will start working from the notebook. And but sometimes with the second or third paragraph, I'm having trouble. So what I will do with that is I'll write it over and over and over again until I get it right. And then I'll just continue. But after the first few pages, I have the book. All I have to do now is write it. And just get up early, or don't stay out late, and just get the work done. Sometimes in the summer in Spain, there's a village and it's very quiet and there's nothing else to do there. Well, you could read, you could go for long walks. But actually, there was one time working on the novel Nora Webster where I began to say, look, I'm going to do 2,000 words a day, which is a huge amount. In other words, basically 2 pages in the morning, or 2.5 pages, and then break for lunch, and then 2.5 pages in the afternoon, and then go back in the evening and work again. But I couldn't do that. You can't do that for very long. You could do that for maybe 10 days, maybe 15. At the end of the 15, that's you finish for a while. You can read over, but you're better to do nothing. The surround doesn't really have any effect on me. I work sometimes in New York or in Ireland or in Spain, but it doesn't really matter. The main thing is, I think you live in your head, but that's not true for every writer. There are writers who really need the same space, exactly the same silence. But that doesn't bother me. I wouldn't have music playing, but no, it wouldn't matter. I suppose it would be better if there was a blank wall to look at rather than a beautiful view. Maybe a beautiful view later when you're finished, but just you need to concentrate. Your head is down and you need to concentrate. And the thing you've got to remember most is that the page, and you feel it more with the page, is not a mirror, it's blank. And therefore the sort of you don't really exist when you're working, and that you're giving everything you have to the scenario or the character or the tone or the rhythm, and you're doing that so that you're making something in the same way as a sculptor might make something that will be seen in the future that won't belong to you. So you're moving outwards all the time, but of course you're moving inwards too, because you're moving inwards for memory. If you think you need a room, you'll often just find a room that you remember, or how light came into a room that you remember. And I built a house on the Wexford coast in Ireland, and I think it has helped in some way to solidify certain memories or allow them to rise better. And the strange thing about it is the thing that really brings memory back best is smell. More than sight or more than sound, the smell of grass at a certain time of the year, of clover, that can be quite intensely evocative. I would never read aloud what I'd written at the end of the day. I know there are writers who do that. It feels to me a strange sort of narcissism in it, of liking the sound of your own voice, which I don't. But it isn't. But it's a more serious matter than that. It is that the book is to be read in silence by the reader, and it's written in silence by me, and I particularly don't need to know what it sounds like out loud. I need to know what it reads like, and I have to make a judgment on the silent reading as a result of silent reading. A judgment as a result of reading out loud could be looking for colour or looking for something in a book that a book maybe shouldn't have. Because, and also for me, I work with quietness a lot, with novels in which nothing much happens, so that I do know what every sentence is doing. There is a rhythm or a melody that you're working from. And that's the thing that's in the prose. So you don't have to read it out loud to be able to identify that or manipulate it or work with it. You should know it, or at least you should know it reasonably well. You're often wrong about when a novel is finished. In other words, you have an image you're working towards that is the very final image, and you're so sure that you write it. And the thing is, you really need to, once you give yourself even a few days, or somebody else can read it for you, to say, this is too sudden and abrupt. You need one more thing to bring this novel down and out of itself. And with some of the novels, especially with, say, the novel Brooklyn, or indeed with this novel Nora Webster, certain readers who are very used to other sorts of books in which everything is tied up at the end, in which you really know how the characters will live the rest of their lives, they find them very unsatisfactory, and they want to say, is there going to be a sequel? I need to know more. And I say, no, that's how I end novels, where you have to imagine the aftermath or the afterworld of the novel. But the technical problem arises from having an image that's too strong and powerful at the very end, and realizing that now you need a sort of softening agent to bring it down and down and down. This may be within the rhythm, but it's also not introducing... I mean, I'll give you an example of this. In my novel, The Blackwater Lightship, I always had an image that he would drive out of the hospital where their son is dying. And it's one of those Irish hospitals where you put money into a thing immediately, and an arm lifts, and the car can get out and then come down, and you're out. And that was to be the end of the novel. And I was so sure about this, I was always working towards it. And then, luckily, my editor read it. I said, here's the novel. And he said, well, where's the end? I said, no, that is the end. He said, no, it's not. And I was lucky I was listening. Because then when I read it over, I said, oh, I said, I don't have another image. And we talked about it. And I said, I just don't have another thing they can do. He said, it doesn't need another thing. It just needs nothing. But it needs nothing to happen for a page. So I have them driving across the city, saying nothing, or nothing much. I have them going back to the house, and the minute I got the next image, I was suddenly find that she reaches down and picks up 2 envelopes that are on the floor because she hasn't been home for 2 days. And the mail has come, the post, and she's just picking that up. And also, she realized she's no milk in the fridge. And then her mother says something, then she says something else. All low-key, all down. And then you just bring the novel out. So the ending I had is just a page or 2 pages away from the ending I used in the end, you know, the final ending. But it really wouldn't have worked. It would have looked like clunk, rather than da 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 la la huh. You know.